The cabin shook slightly as turbulence whispered through the metal frame. Passengers barely noticed. Some scrolled through phones, some slept, some chatted softly under the low hum of the engines. Nobody realized that in just a few hours, every heartbeat on this plane would depend on a woman sitting quietly in seat 14B. Her name was Naomi Carter, 44 years old. Dark skin, faint scar running down her cheek like a line drawn by fire. She sat with a small carry-on tucked neatly beneath her seat, wearing an old gray sweater that had clearly seen better days. The seat beside her was empty for now, but that wouldn't last long. Naomi wasn't watching movies or scrolling through her phone. She was reading a Boeing 787 Flight Systems manual, not a magazine or novel. A technical guide dense with schematics, pressure values, and checklists. She studied every line as if her life depended on it. A man in the aisle stopped, tall and broad-shouldered, about 30. His uniform was crisp, pilot stripes glinting proudly. Ethan Briggs, the first officer. He looked at Naomi, then at the manual in her hands and chuckled. "You actually reading that?" His tone was playful at first, then condescending. "You an engineer or something?" Naomi looked up briefly. "Something like that," Ethan smirked. "Right, sure." He leaned closer. "Where'd you even get that thing?" She replied calmly. "It's public. FAA archives." Ethan grabbed the corner of one page, flipping it without permission. His voice lowered. "People don't just read this kind of stuff for fun." His tone wasn't curious anymore. It was mocking. Naomi met his gaze, unflinching. "Some people read to understand how things work." He stared for a moment, then laughed out loud, drawing attention from nearby passengers. "Lady, you're on a commercial flight, not in flight school." He shoved the manual back into her lap. A few people smirked, others looked away. Nobody intervened. Minutes later, while Naomi gathered her scattered notes, Ethan muttered under his breath, "Probably doesn't even know what she's reading." Then he walked off toward the cockpit. Naomi stayed silent, pressing the torn pages together. The laughter still echoed faintly in her mind, but she had learned long ago to let that sound pass through her like static. Earlier that evening, before boarding, JFK Airport Gate A21 was buzzing with its usual organized chaos. Families juggling passports, business travelers typing last-minute emails, announcements echoing over the PA. Naomi sat alone near the window, sipping weak coffee from a paper cup. She had been up since dawn, reviewing technical data for a plane she'd never intended to fly again. She had once been among the top test pilots at Aero West, a major aircraft manufacturer. She helped write safety procedures that others memorized in training. But 12 years ago, after an accident that took her co-pilot's life, she walked away from the cockpit for good. Until tonight. She was flying to London for a quiet consulting job. Nothing dramatic, or so she thought. At the boarding gate, the airline attendant, Lydia Holmes, greeted passengers with polished smiles that changed tone depending on who approached. When a man in a business suit handed over his boarding pass, she beamed. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Daniels. Enjoy your flight." When Naomi stepped forward, Lydia's smile thinned. "Boarding pass, please." Her tone flattened, routine, detached. Naomi handed it over silently. As Naomi turned to walk down the jet bridge, she heard a murmur behind her, someone snickering about her worn shoes. She ignored it. She'd flown through lightning storms and engine fires. A few whispers meant nothing. Inside the plane, the captain, Gerald Knox, was already running pre-flight checks. Seasoned, steady, 58 years old. He had the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen everything at 37,000 feet. His young co-pilot, Ethan, moved quickly through his tasks. Too quickly. "Slow down," Gerald said sharply. "You skipped fuel balance," Ethan sighed. "I checked it already. Check it again." The tension in the cockpit thickened. Naomi passed by unnoticed, heading for her seat in row 14. But she saw it all, the skipped steps, the impatience. She said nothing. She'd been that young once, confident, reckless, untouchable, until the sky proved her wrong. As passengers settled in, Naomi felt a tap on her shoulder. The man assigned to the seat beside her, Robert Hayes, mid-50s, expensive watch, expensive cologne, the kind of man who never waits in line, looked at his boarding pass and frowned. "You're in 14B?" he asked. "Yes." He turned to the flight attendant. "There must be a mistake. I paid for extra legroom." "I'm not sitting here," Lydia checked her tablet. This is the correct seat, sir. Robert leaned closer, lowering his voice. Look, I can't sit next to this. His eyes flicked toward Naomi, lingering on her scar, her simple cardigan. Find me somewhere else. Naomi didn't move, didn't react. Lydia hesitated, then nodded. Let me see what I can do. Moments later, Robert was reseated in row 9. Naomi watched him leave, then closed her manual quietly. The seat beside her stayed empty as the cabin filled. When Ethan walked through later, inspecting rows, he saw the manual open again. Still reading that thing? He asked. He smiled for the crowd, but his voice was sharp. What are you, trying to learn to fly? Naomi didn't answer. He reached for her papers again. Let's see what you've got here. Please don't, she said. But he already had the pages in his hand, annotated checklists, hydraulic system notes, pressure tables. He scanned them and sneered. You actually think you could understand this? These are pilot procedures. She met his gaze steadily. Yes, I know. He laughed again, too loud this time. Oh, sure. Maybe next you'll tell me you fly this thing. The laughter spilled into nearby seats. Then he did something unforgivable. He reached for his coffee cup, still hot, and in a clumsy show of dominance tilted it just enough to spill across her sweater. The shock of heat hit her skin. The cup clattered. Ethan smiled faintly. Oops, guess that cardigan needed washing. He walked away. Lydia saw. A college student 2 rows up saw. Nobody moved. Naomi pressed napkins against the stain, the smell of coffee filling her senses. Bitter, burned, humiliating. She could have spoken up. She could have made a scene. But she didn't. She simply gathered the torn, coffee-stained pages and folded them neatly. It wasn't the first time someone like him thought she didn't belong, and it wouldn't be the last. 2 hours later, over the North Atlantic, the cabin was quiet. The seatbelt sign was off. The plane cruised smoothly at 38,000 feet. Naomi sat still, eyes closed, letting the steady hum of engines lull her. In the cockpit, Captain Knox stretched his neck, tired from long hours. Ethan monitored the instruments, yawning. He reached for his water, took a sip, and said, Guess we're halfway there. Gerald nodded. Smooth flight so far. Seconds later, he winced. A sharp pain shot through his chest. He tried to breathe, then grabbed the control column as his vision blurred. Captain? Ethan's voice cracked. No answer. Gerald's body went rigid, then collapsed forward onto the controls. Alarm screamed. The plane lurched downward. Passengers jolted upright, screams filling the cabin. Trays clattered. Drinks spilled. Ethan yanked the control column, voice shaking as he fought the plane. His heart raced. He'd never trained for this without supervision. He hit the intercom. This is First Officer Briggs. Captain is down. If there's a doctor on board, please come to the cockpit immediately. If anyone here has any flight experience, we need you now. The words rippled through the cabin like a shockwave. Panic erupted. People cried. A child shouted, Mommy, are we going to die? Someone prayed out loud. Naomi opened her eyes slowly. The smell of coffee still lingered on her sweater. She looked out the window, black ocean below, stars above, and understood exactly what was happening. She unbuckled her belt. Her legs felt steady, even as others trembled, and as she stood, a murmur spread through the cabin. The same man who mocked her earlier saw her rise and froze. Naomi Carter, the woman with the scar, the one he humiliated, was walking calmly toward the cockpit, and she wasn't walking like a passenger. She was walking like a pilot. The cabin was chaos. Children cried. A man prayed out loud, gripping his seat. Phones flashed as passengers tried to message loved ones, though no signal would reach across the black Atlantic. Naomi moved through the aisle like the eye of a storm, steady, silent, unstoppable. People shifted aside as if something in her calm frightened them more than the turbulence. She stopped at the cockpit door, knocked twice, firm and clear. First Officer Briggs, she said. Let me in. Ethan's voice, trembling, came through the door. Who are you? Someone who can help, she answered. A pause, a clatter, then the lock clicked. When she stepped inside, the room was filled with warning lights and the metallic scent of panic. The captain lay slumped against the bulkhead, barely breathing, his skin pale. Ethan's face was drenched in sweat. He just went down. I don't know what to do. Autopilot's engaged, but Naomi slid into the captain's seat, checking instruments with surgical precision. Altitude holding. Thrust stable. Hydraulic pressure. System A is dropping. She turned her head, eyes steady on him. How long ago did the warning start? I didn't notice until the alarms, he admitted, voice cracking. She didn't scold him. There wasn't time. All right. Get the captain clear. Check his pulse. I'll handle the aircraft, he hesitated. You can't just, who even are you? Her answer was short. Naomi Carter. I'm rated for this aircraft. He blinked, disbelief painted on his face. You're lying. Then watch, she said, her hands already moving over the overhead panel, isolating hydraulic switches, scanning systems faster than he could follow. She reached for the intercom. Medical personnel to the cockpit immediately. The captain is unconscious. Bring first aid equipment. Her voice was calm, professional, the kind of calm that makes people listen. Behind her, the door opened again and Lydia rushed in with a nurse from the cabin. They began CPR, counting compressions aloud. Ethan stood frozen, staring at Naomi's hands as they moved with confidence no simulator could teach. Hydraulic pressure in System B is falling now, she said. If we lose both, we'll have no autopilot and no powered controls. Ethan swallowed hard. You can't hand-fly a 787 across the Atlantic without hydraulics. Her eyes stayed on the instruments. Watch me. For a moment, the only sounds were alarms and the steady rhythm of CPR. Then Naomi's voice cut through the noise. Contact Oceanic Control. Tell them we're declaring an emergency. Ethan fumbled with the radio. This is Oceanic 741 Heavy. Captain incapacitated. We have medical and technical emergencies. Request priority vector to nearest suitable diversion. Static answered first, then a firm voice came back. Copy 741 Heavy. Confirm name of acting pilot. Ethan hesitated. Naomi leaned over and pressed the transmit button. This is Captain Naomi Carter, former Aero West test pilot, 9,000 flight hours type rated on this airframe. I have command. There was silence on the frequency, then the controller's tone changed. Copy, Captain Carter. Priority handling approved. Stand by for reroute. Ethan turned toward her, disbelief giving way to realization. Naomi Carter? The Naomi Carter? You wrote the certification procedures for this plane. She nodded once, never looking up. That's right. Now start reading me the emergency checklist for dual hydraulic degradation. Page 284. He obeyed without argument. Behind them, Lydia pressed on the captain's chest, tears streaming down her face. The nurse counted under her breath. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, repeat. Naomi's voice was steady as she worked. Keep him stable. Every minute counts. The aircraft trembled slightly. Warning tones repeated. She adjusted trim manually, fighting the slow drift in altitude. We're losing pressure faster than expected. Once it drops below 300 psi, manual reversion will engage. Controls will be heavy. Ethan's hand shook. You've actually flown manual reversion? Yes, during certification, in simulator and live tests. He stared at her. You saved the prototype that lost hydraulics over Arizona. They said it was impossible. Her expression didn't change. Then it's time to do impossible again. The nurse looked up. He's breathing, faint but steady. Naomi nodded. Good, keep him secure. We'll land in about 90 minutes. Ethan's head snapped toward her. 90 minutes? We're in the middle of the Atlantic. Closest diversion is Keflavik, Iceland, she said. We can reach it on current fuel. Wind's strong but manageable if we act fast. He shook his head in disbelief. That's nearly 700 miles away. Then let's start flying, she replied. She opened the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Carter from the flight deck. Captain Knox is receiving medical attention. I am qualified and in control of the aircraft. We are diverting to Iceland. Cabin crew, secure the cabin and prepare for a possible emergency landing. Stay calm. We will bring you down safely. The cabin went quiet after that. The panic shifted into stunned silence. Back in row 9, Robert Hayes, the man who had refused to sit beside her, stared at the ceiling. His stomach churned with guilt. He had laughed at her, dismissed her, and now his life depended entirely on the woman he had judged. In the cockpit, Ethan read aloud, voice steadier now as work replaced fear. Hydraulic system B pressure at 900 psi falling. Mark it, Naomi said. Every 100 psi, call it out. Yes, Captain, she turned to him briefly. You can panic later. Right now, focus, he nodded. Understood. Outside, the night stretched endless and black. Below, the Atlantic glistened faintly under moonlight. Inside the cockpit, The hum of machinery and the rhythmic calls of altitudes filled the air like a heartbeat. Hours of muscle memory resurfaced in Naomi's mind. Every flight test, every emergency sim, every heartbeat from years of flying when the stakes were as high as the clouds. Then, through the radio, a new voice crackled in. Older, familiar. Aero West Technical Ops to 741 Heavy. We've received telemetry. Can you confirm acting captain's name? Naomi pressed the switch again. Captain Naomi Carter. There was a pause, then the voice softened with awe. Carter, you're back in the air. You test flew this exact airframe during certification. You saved it once already. Ethan turned pale. This is your plane, she nodded once. It was, the technician continued. Captain, both systems are failing. You'll lose all hydraulic power in 20 minutes. I know, she said quietly. Send me crosswind data for Keflavik runway 20. I'll need everything you have. Copy that, Captain. You've got every eye on you now. Naomi didn't answer. Her focus narrowed to the horizon ahead, the faint curve of Earth below, and the quiet hum of the engines that were about to test her will like never before. The pressure gauge dropped again. System B at 500. Ethan called. Her grip tightened on the controls. When it hits 300, the real flying begins. Outside, a storm was brewing over the Atlantic. And inside, the woman who everyone underestimated was preparing to prove once again that competence doesn't need permission. Wind howled against the fuselage as the aircraft pushed through thickening clouds. The radar flickered with patches of yellow and red. Ethan's voice trembled as he called out, System B pressure at 400 psi. Naomi's eyes didn't move from the instruments. Stay with me. Once it drops below 300, controls will stiffen. I'll need both hands and both feet. Ethan swallowed hard. Roger. The radio crackled again. Oceanic control to flight 741. Heavy, you are cleared direct Keflavik. Winds 310 at 38 knots, gusting to 45. Naomi repeated the numbers quietly. Gusting 45. Over limit by 10 knots. Ethan looked at her. You can't land a heavy jet in that. It's suicide. Her tone was steady. Then we'll make it look easy. A light flashed on the panel. System B at 290, Ethan said. Naomi felt it instantly. The yoke fought back, heavier, slower. Power steering gone. Her shoulders tightened with the weight of 900,000 pounds of metal and fear. She adjusted the trim manually, sweat forming at her temples. Manual reversion confirmed, she said. No autopilot. No auto throttle. This is all hands now. Ethan stared at her arms, muscles straining as she steadied the aircraft against crosswinds. You're actually flying it by hand. All of it. Yes, she said. Now call the altitudes. He obeyed, voice cracking. 35,000, descending. Outside, lightning flashed across the Atlantic horizon. The storm ahead spread wide, its edges like black smoke curling against stars. Naomi's eyes narrowed. She had flown through worse, but never with hundreds of lives behind her and no power assistance. Flaps are hydraulic, she muttered. We'll only have partial movement. Brakes too. Everything's manual now. Ethan looked sick. So how do we stop? By flying perfectly, she said. He almost laughed, then realized she meant it. Naomi keyed the radio again. Aero West Technical Ops. Confirm runway conditions for Keflavik. Runway 20, wet surface, light snow. Braking action medium to poor. Wind 310 at 38, gusting 45. Crosswind component 39 knots. Ethan's voice cracked. The aircraft limit is 35. We can't do that. Naomi's reply was calm, almost gentle. Limits are written for safety margins, not impossibilities. He nodded slowly. So what's the plan? We'll use a crab-to-kick technique. Fly the approach at an angle into the wind, then straighten just before touchdown. Ethan blinked. That's military stuff. You learned that flying fighters? Her jaw tightened slightly. Before I joined Aero West, I flew F-16s. Some habits never die. The aircraft began to shake as turbulence hit. Drinks toppled, people screamed again. Lydia's voice came over the PA, calm but trembling. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Fasten your seatbelts. We are experiencing turbulence. Naomi steadied the plane, nudging the yoke with tiny, precise movements. We're fine, she said to herself more than anyone else. We're okay. Ethan's hands clutched the center console. System check complete. Fuel balance steady. ETA to Keflavik 1 hour 23 minutes, she nodded. Plenty, monitor engines for heat. Without hydraulics, we can't trust auto-cooling. Understood. Then a new sound joined the alarms, a low mechanical rumble from the floor beneath them. Naomi's eyes flicked down. The right engine temperature spiked. Engine 2 bleed air temperature rising, she said. Ethan glanced at the display. It's redlining. Shut bleed air valve 2. Crossflow from 1. He obeyed, flipping the switches with trembling fingers. The temperature stabilized. Naomi exhaled. Good, that's one problem solved. He looked at her with disbelief. How are you so calm? Because panic kills faster than failure, she said. Outside, the world was pure black water and stormlight. Inside, Naomi Carter held control of 900,000 pounds of machinery with muscle, memory, and willpower. Her hands ached. Her arms burned. But she wouldn't let go. In the cabin, Robert Hayes sat motionless, listening to the soft hum of the engines. He kept seeing her face in his mind, the woman he had refused to sit beside. Every second that passed, the shame sank deeper. He turned to the woman next to him. That's her, isn't it? The woman from 14B? The passenger nodded. She's flying the plane. He closed his eyes. God help us all. Back in the cockpit, Arrow West's voice returned on the radio. Captain Carter, we've confirmed telemetry. You are flying aircraft serial 7861 Alpha? Yes, a pause, then the voice softened. Captain, you flew this aircraft during its final test phase 12 years ago. You logged over 200 test hours in it. You know it better than anyone alive. Naomi's expression didn't change, but her voice grew quieter. That's why I have to land it. Static filled the cabin, followed by another voice. Oceanic Control. Flight 741 Heavy. All Atlantic traffic rerouted for your emergency. You have full priority and escort authorization. Military aircraft will meet you on approach. Ethan's jaw dropped. They're scrambling fighters. Naomi nodded slightly. Standard for high-risk descents. They'll track us visually. He stared at her. They're treating you like a legend. She didn't smile. I'm just doing my job. He looked away, ashamed. You shouldn't have to after what I... Not now, she said. Talk later. Fly now. He nodded quickly. Minutes stretched into miles. The storm grew louder, the aircraft heavier. Naomi's hands were slick with sweat as she gripped the yoke, her shoulders trembling with the effort. System B pressure at 280. Stabilized, Ethan reported. Good, keep it there. ETA 54 minutes. She nodded again. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the calm and control, Naomi's heart pounded. She had faced this once before. No hydraulics, no second chances. But back then she was in a test aircraft alone. No passengers. No one to save but herself. Now 287 souls depended on her, including the man who'd spilled coffee down her front, and she would save them all. The storm outside flared with lightning, illuminating the ocean below like shards of glass. Naomi's voice cut through the cockpit again. Set descent path for 30,000. Begin slow reduction. Keep the pitch steady. Ethan complied, his hand steadier than before. For the first time, he wasn't following procedure. He was following her. In the cabin, Lydia walked the aisle, checking seatbelts, whispering reassurance even as her own hands shook. People prayed. Some cried quietly. Others stared ahead, numb. Every life in that cabin was suspended between faith and physics, and at the center of it all, Naomi Carter, scarred, underestimated, humiliated, was writing a new definition of courage with every mile they crossed. The radio buzzed again. Captain Carter, weather report updated. Crosswinds increasing to 43 knots. Naomi took a deep breath. Copy that, Ethan's voice broke. That's over the safe limit. What do we do? Her eyes stayed forward. We land anyway. He stared at her profile, the faint scar glinting in the instrument light, and finally understood. She wasn't flying for pride. She was flying because she refused to let anyone die because of someone else's arrogance. Outside, the horizon began to glow faintly with dawn. Iceland waited ahead, cold, stormy, and unforgiving. Naomi flexed her hands on the yoke, feeling the aircraft fight her every inch. The hard part, she said softly, is just beginning. The first sign of dawn slipped across the horizon, a faint silver line that blurred into storm clouds. The aircraft began its descent, and every passenger could feel it. The pressure in their ears changed. The engine's steady hum deepened, and the quiet realization spread that they were going down, not crashing, but landing or trying to. Naomi's voice was calm over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Carter. We are beginning our descent toward Keflavik, Iceland. Weather conditions are challenging, but we're fully in control. Stay seated, remain calm, and trust the process. We will get you home. That last line carried through the cabin like a thread of hope. People clung to it. In the cockpit, Ethan read the instruments aloud. Altitude 330. Descending to flight level 280. Airspeed holding steady. Good, Naomi said. Adjust throttles 1 and 2 manually. We'll lose auto throttle when system pressure drops below 200. Her arms trembled from effort. The yoke was heavy now. Unassisted by hydraulics, every small motion requiring muscle and precision. Sweat trickled down her temples. She felt it sting the scar on her cheek, but she didn't blink. Approach control online, Ethan said. Keflavik Tower confirms visibility 1 mile. Winds 310 at 39, gusting 45. Ceiling 400 feet. Naomi nodded. That's our window. Window? She pointed at the screen. We'll only see the runway for about 5 seconds before touchdown. If we miss that gap, we can't go around. We have 1 shot. He exhaled slowly. 1 shot. Yes, and we're taking it. The turbulence struck harder now. The nose pitched left, then right. The airframe groaned under strain. Naomi steadied it, using tiny corrections, feeling the weight of the aircraft respond like a stubborn giant. In the cabin, Lydia braced herself as she moved down the aisle. Seatbelts tight, trays up, electronics off, she said firmly. Her voice trembled, but she never stopped moving. When she reached row 9, Robert Hayes was gripping the armrests, pale as ash. Are we going to make it? He whispered. Lydia hesitated, then said, She's the best pilot on this plane, sir. You're safer than you think. He swallowed, looking toward the closed cockpit door. I judged her. God help me, I judged her. Naomi didn't know his thoughts, but she could feel the collective fear pressing against the cockpit walls like a living thing. She focused on breathing. 1 second at a time. 1 control at a time. System B at 160, Ethan reported. Her knuckles tightened on the controls. Manual reversion full at 100. Keep reading me descent checklist. Flaps 5, he said. Set. Speed brakes armed. Armed. Landing gear? Not yet. Wait until below 10,000. We don't want drag too soon. She keyed the radio. Keflavik approach flight 741 heavy descending through flight level 240. Request vectors ILS runway 20. Keflavik copies 741 heavy. You are cleared ILS runway 20. Turn right heading 180. Descend to 4,000. All emergency services standing by. You are our priority, Captain. Thank you, Naomi said simply. Ethan glanced sideways at her. They're treating you like royalty. She smiled faintly. I'd rather be treated like a pilot. Outside, lightning flashed again, illuminating the storm like a living beast. The aircraft rocked hard, but Naomi held it steady. System B at 120, Ethan said. She nodded. When it hits 100, I'll take manual control completely. You monitor engine thrust and call out airspeeds. Understood. The next jolt sent a collective scream through the cabin. Drinks spilled. A baby cried. But the voice that came through the speakers was calm, unshaken. Everything is fine, Naomi said. This is normal turbulence. We are on course. Her calm was contagious. People stopped screaming. Some even closed their eyes. The pressure gauge dropped again. 100 psi, Ethan said. Naomi inhaled. Manual reversion engaged. The yoke stiffened instantly, heavy as stone. Her arms strained. Every small correction now took full strength. Gear down, she ordered. Ethan moved the lever. The sound of the landing gear extending echoed through the fuselage, a deep mechanical thud that rippled through the floor. 3 green, he said. Gear down and locked. Good, flaps 15, he flipped the lever. The aircraft's nose pitched slightly as the flaps extended. Speed 190. Holding. Naomi's voice grew quieter. Runways 12 miles out. Final approach in 4 minutes. Keflavik Tower to flight 741 heavy. Winds now 310 at 42, gusting 45. Crosswind component 41. Copy, she said. We're committed. Ethan shook his head. We're way past the safe limit. Then we'll make a new one. He couldn't argue. The first lights of Iceland flickered below through the storm. Distant, faint like candles in the dark. Naomi adjusted pitch, keeping the glide slope perfect. Her shoulders burned. Her voice stayed calm. We're lined up. Approaching localizer. Localizer alive, Ethan confirmed. Glide slope alive. Flaps 20, set. Speed 170, set. She could feel the wind fighting her, a living thing clawing at the metal wings. She used her feet on the rudder pedals, countering the yaw, keeping the nose aligned even as the plane wanted to roll. Blake. Sorry, Ethan, she said quietly, catching herself. When we touch down, we'll have no auto brakes. I'll need full manual pressure. Be ready to assist with reversers manually. He blinked. You think we'll stop? Her eyes flicked toward him. We'll stop. The question is how close to the edge. The radio crackled again. Aero West Technical Ops to 741 Heavy. Captain Carter, entire operations team is monitoring. We're seeing you on radar. The data feed is steady. Godspeed. Naomi didn't reply. She couldn't afford the distraction. They broke through the last layer of cloud, and there it was, the runway lights ahead, faint but real, shining through snow and darkness. Runway in sight. Ethan breathed. Final approach, Naomi said. Crab angle 18 degrees. The aircraft was pointing slightly sideways, nose into the wind, drifting toward the runway at an angle that looked wrong to everyone who didn't understand flight. Ethan's voice trembled. You're flying sideways. Correct, she said. And if I stop doing that, we'll crash. Wind gusted again. The plane dipped. The altimeter screamed. Naomi gritted her teeth and pulled back, muscles burning. 700 feet. Stable, she said. 500. On glide slope. 300. The runway lights grew larger, brighter. Kick it straight, she whispered to herself. Her right foot pressed hard on the rudder pedal. The aircraft straightened in one smooth motion, aligning with the runway. 200 feet. The gust hit then, 45 knots across the nose. The aircraft lurched left. Passengers screamed. Ethan shouted, "We're off center." Naomi's voice rose, steady but fierce. Hold. Her left hand pulled the yoke, right foot countered the yaw. The massive jet obeyed. 50 feet, 30, 20, 10. The wheels slammed down hard. The impact rattled the entire cabin. The passengers jolted forward against their seatbelts. Reverse thrust, she shouted. Ethan yanked the levers. Nothing. The systems were dead. Manual brakes, she commanded. Her feet pressed both pedals with every ounce of strength she had left. The aircraft screamed across the wet runway, wheels skidding. Smoke rising in the snow. 80 knots, Ethan called. 60. 40. The runway end lights flashed closer. 20. 10. Then silence. The plane shuddered, slowed, and stopped. 83 feet from the edge. Naomi's breath came in short, shaking bursts. Her arms were numb. The yoke felt fused to her hands. Ethan stared at the instruments. We stopped. We actually stopped. She closed her eyes for a second. Told you we would. Outside, emergency lights flashed red and blue through the snow. Fire trucks and ambulances raced toward them. Inside, nobody spoke. Then someone started clapping. Another joined. Then the entire cabin erupted. Cheers, sobs, applause that filled the plane like thunder. Naomi sat back, breathing hard. Tears she didn't expect slipping down her cheeks. They were alive. All of them. The sound of applause still filled the cabin as Naomi slowly released her grip from the yoke. Her fingers ached from holding on too tightly. Her forearms burned with exhaustion. She looked down at her trembling hands, and then at the blinking lights of the control panel. Every single warning had fallen silent. The engines were idling peacefully. The storm outside raged on, but inside that cockpit, there was only stillness. Ethan wiped his face, voice breaking. Captain Carter, that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Naomi leaned back against the seat, her chest heaving, her voice low. We just did what had to be done. The cockpit door opened. Lydia stood there, eyes red and wet. Behind her, medics waited with a stretcher. Captain Knox lay unconscious but breathing, pale but alive. Naomi pointed gently. He's stable. Get him to the hospital right away. The medics nodded and moved past her, carefully lifting the captain. As they carried him through the cabin, passengers began clapping again. Some were crying openly now, reaching out to touch Naomi's arm as she walked past them. A child's voice broke through the noise. Mommy, she's the one who saved us. Naomi turned slightly and saw a little girl standing on her seat, small hands pressed against the backrest, eyes wide and shining. The mother pulled her down quickly, whispering thanks as Naomi passed. Robert Hayes was still seated in row 9. face buried in his hands. When Naomi approached, he stood quickly, his face flushed with shame. "Captain Carter," he began, but the words stuck. His voice cracked as he tried again. I don't deserve to say anything to you. You saved my life after I treated you like—" Naomi met his eyes, calm but firm. "You're alive. That's what matters now." He shook his head. "No, it's not enough to just be alive after this. Not if we keep living the same way we did before." His voice broke completely. "I was blind and you opened my eyes." Naomi said nothing more. She just nodded, and for a brief second, there was a quiet understanding between them, a truth that didn't need words. Lydia stood by the open cabin door, watching passengers leave. When Naomi reached her, the flight attendant's voice shook. "Captain, I judged you. I saw him humiliate you and said nothing. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make that right." Naomi placed a hand on her shoulder. "You stayed calm. You led your crew. You saved people. That's what I'll remember." Tears rolled down Lydia's face. "You're too kind." "It's not kindness," Naomi said. "It's what leadership looks like." Outside, the Icelandic ground crew had formed 2 lines along the runway, clapping slowly as she descended the stairs. Snow swirled in the air, sticking to her hair, her coat, her face. Each step she took felt heavier than the last. Her entire body ached, but she walked tall. Reporters shouted from behind barriers, cameras flashing. She ignored them all. The only thing she wanted was silence. In the terminal, she found a quiet corner in a machine that served weak airport coffee. She poured herself a cup, the smell filling her lungs. This time, coffee didn't remind her of humiliation. It reminded her of survival. Her phone buzzed. A message from Aero West appeared. "Captain Carter, you just hand flew a 787 through total hydraulic loss and crosswinds beyond certification. You saved 287 lives. You'll be in the next edition of the training manual." She smiled faintly and typed back, "Glad the manual still works." Another message came almost immediately. "We want you back as chief test pilot." She looked out the window, snow swirling like dust in the floodlights. After a long moment, she typed, "No, I'm where I'm needed most, teaching the next generation to trust their own hands." Months passed. Investigations concluded. The world learned what Naomi Carter had done that night. The FAA called it the most skillful emergency landing ever recorded in modern aviation. Aero West engineers studied the telemetry and updated their manuals to include her procedures. But Naomi didn't appear in interviews or on talk shows. She declined every award ceremony. She only returned to work as a flight instructor. When her first class began, 20 young pilots filled the room. Among them was Ethan Briggs, humbler, quieter, with new stripes on his shoulder and a changed look in his eyes. Naomi entered and set a manual on the desk. "Today," she said, "we'll talk about what happens when everything fails." Ethan raised his hand. "What do you do when the manual doesn't have the answer?" She looked at him for a long moment. "You trust yourself, and you remember why you're flying, not for recognition, but because people are counting on you to bring them home." After class, Ethan approached her. His voice was soft but sincere. "Captain Carter, I never apologized properly. I was arrogant, cruel, and ignorant. You didn't just save me from dying that night. You saved me from the kind of man I was becoming." "Thank you." Naomi nodded. "An apology means nothing unless you change afterward, and you have." He smiled faintly. "I'm trying. Keep trying," she said. "That's how pilots grow." A year later, Naomi received a letter. It was from Robert Hayes. The first page began with shaking handwriting. "You changed my life. I built walls without realizing it. Walls made of judgment and pride. I've started a scholarship in your name for young women of color who want to fly. The Naomi Carter Aviation Fund. It's not enough to thank you, but it's a start." She read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in her logbook. Another year passed. Captain Knox made a full recovery and retired, publicly thanking her for saving him. calling her a pilot's pilot, the kind we all wish we could be. Naomi continued teaching, her students whispering stories about the night she saved hundreds. But she rarely spoke of it. When she did, she only said, "We did our jobs." 10 years later, she was boarding a domestic flight home. She found her seat, middle of row 19, and smiled at the familiar hum of engines. She wasn't in the cockpit today, and that was fine. As she buckled her seatbelt, a young girl a few rows ahead turned around, staring at her with wide eyes. She was maybe 11, brown-skinned, with her hair in neat braids. She whispered something to her mother, who smiled but didn't turn. The girl kept staring. Finally, she spoke softly but clear enough for Naomi to hear. "Are you Captain Carter?" Naomi smiled. "I am." The girl's face lit up. "I saw you in a video at flight camp. You landed the big plane when everyone said it was impossible. I want to be a pilot like you." Naomi leaned forward, her voice warm. "Then promise me something." "What?" "Don't let anyone tell you that you can't. Not because of your skin. Not because you're a girl. Not because they can't see what you're capable of. You know who you are. Let your work speak louder than their doubt." The girl nodded eagerly. "I will. I promise." Naomi smiled. "Good. I'll be watching the skies for you." As the girl turned back around, she whispered to her doll. "She saw me." Naomi closed her eyes and rested her head against the seat. Outside, the engines roared to life and the plane began to taxi. Somewhere above the clouds, the contrails of another flight glowed faintly in the morning sun, silver lines stretching endlessly toward tomorrow. And for the first time in years, Naomi Carter allowed herself to feel at peace. She had faced humiliation and hatred. She had looked death straight in the eye and refused to blink. She had saved hundreds and changed the hearts of those who once doubted her. She didn't need applause, headlines, or fame. Her legacy lived quietly in the sky, in every pilot she trained, every person she saved, every little girl who believed she could fly. The engines lifted the plane off the ground, and Naomi smiled to herself. Somewhere out there, someone was learning to fly, and this time the sky belonged to them all.